Hi, in this video I want to talk about if you can finance your studies in Germany completely by part-time job, because I know this is a super interesting question. The reason that studies in Germany is free attracts a lot of people, and they think like maybe, if we can also just do the part-time job there and sustain from it, then of course it becomes a really good opportunity for you to like kind of improve whatever kind of situation you are in, and especially for the people who are like maybe financially a bit weaker, right? So for them, like definitely that's a option that they very highly regard. So I understand all of that, and that's why I wanted to make this video. The quick answer to this question is it really depends. It absolutely depends on what kind of city you're living, what kind of job you're getting, what kind of course you're studying. But I'm going to give you an example, like kind of rough case study, let's say, and we are going to take the extremes, so realistic extremes, because I know students who are paying these kind of amounts for like all of the different kind of expenses. One important part to remember is if you're living in a smaller town, your expenses are always going to be lower when you're living in a major city, and the main reason for that of course is that like you have less opportunities, and then because of that lesser people come there, and because lesser people come there, supply and demand, then you don't have so much demand for accommodation and all of the other things. So that is the story, and the biggest expense that puts a lot of pressure on your pocket generally is the house rent itself, because if you can just cut the house rent in half, like you save actually quite a few euros in your entire budget of the month. So that is like super important to understand. So by remembering that in a smaller city you will be paying actually lesser than a bigger city, let's move forward. But before we move forward, another important note. So although you're living in a smaller city, it kind of like holds you back from getting access to those bigger opportunities, because maybe you have a job fair or something, then you want to go there, maybe there's some kind of conference, then you want to go there. If you are living in a smaller city, either it is going to be expensive to travel there every single time. For example, if you're living in Baden-Württemberg or North Rhine-Westphalia, then of course you have the entire state's ticket, so like you can just really travel around everywhere. Even Bremen has such a nice thing that the students from Bremen can actually come to Hamburg without any kind of cost, but like the students from Hamburg cannot like do the same. So this is interesting. So every single city has their own kind of like autonomous rules, like how they're going to kind of like give the freedom to the students and how the transportation is going to work and everything. So super important things to remember that this could be very different to your case. Now let's start with rents. So if you are looking for any kind of student accommodation, it can range from somewhere around 350 to 400 euros all the way down to just 180 euros. And I know students who are like kind of giving these kind of expenditures. So the 180, it is in East Germany, small city called Chemnitz, and 350, it's just Hamburg. And if you're going to Munich, like you might even think about paying up to 500 euros or more for the accommodation alone. So this is like the huge difference, right? If you're going to Aachen or Karlsruhe or like these other smaller cities, then of course like the rent again becomes lesser. Now afterwards, let's talk about groceries. It also like really depends, but I think for students a very realistic estimate could be somewhere around 120 to 150 euros. I think in that you can buy sufficient groceries. Plus students also like not eat like 3 times a day. It's like I eat in the morning, and then afterwards I come back at night, I cook something, and I just like eat it and like move forward. At least that was the case with us when I was doing my bachelor's in India. I was living in a hostel, and like with friends it's like really different. But even in Germany, like from the students that I've talked to, like they have told me like of course we don't have any kind of like proper eating cycle, and that's why we also listen a lot of things from our parents, but it doesn't really stop us. So groceries could be 120 to 150 euros. Then afterwards you have your phone, which could be 10 euros. And phone is actually a super important thing, because Alina and I, we once got stuck in a very bad contract. So it was a contract where the person said, hey look Alina, we are going to quit your older contract, and you and Bharat can start a new contract where you just have to pay 70 euros a month, and you get like I think 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes of internet. I don't know, 4. Yeah, it was 4 from Vodafone and this Telefonica company. And that was so wrong, because they did not quit Alina's contract. So we were essentially paying for 3 contracts. Alina was paying 50 euros, I was paying 35, and Alina was again paying another 35 euros for her contract. So 120 euros, somewhere around that, like we were paying to these company. So if you are careful about it, you can just get a prepaid plan like Aldi Talk or Lidl or Winsim or something like that. and you would just be paying maybe 6 euros to 8 euros. So like, let's say phone expenses 10 euros, Wi-Fi, it is going to be 20 euros if you're paying it separately, but most of the times if you're living in a student hostel, you get the Wi-Fi included. Then let's talk about insurance. That's around 100 euros. Then you have your maybe some other kind of expenses. Let's put like 100 euros inside there. So I would say, even if you're like kind of adding all of these things together, your monthly expense should be somewhere around 510 to 680 euros, like, or let's say 500 to 700 euros. So now when we know the numbers, we can actually start running down, or like reverse engineering what kind of money we should be earning and how many hours we should be working in order to like kind of sustain ourselves. Important thing to remember is there's a reason why the German government has put 853 euros per month as the standard for students, that they have to show 853 euros per month. That is a total of 10,236 euros for a year, so that you're able to come to Germany, so that they have this kind of financial security that when you come to Germany, you're not going to like ask for any kind of help financially from the German government. So that is like an important criteria for that. So if they are saying 853, you might even understand that 853 is a good measure of how much money you should be like earning, or should be kind of like sustaining yourself with. It's definitely possible to like just even survive yourself in 500 euros. It's totally possible in a smaller city, but 853 euros is something that you should be thinking of. So this was about the expenditure. Now let's talk about the income. So if you're doing any kind of part-time job, of course, like, you have to take care of the basic rules that you either work 240 half days or 120 full days. So this is super important. And in a week you can work a maximum of like 20 hours per week, right? So super important things. Now the range could be anywhere from 10 euros to 15 euros. 10 euros is like rather towards the very low end, and 15 euros is towards the better end. And 12.5 I'm taking like as a nice medium. And that was also like the money that I was earning when I was doing my part-time job in the company in Hamburg. It was like related to structural engineering. Yeah, so with that you can either work for 16 hours or you can work for 20 hours. So why am I saying 16? 16 is actually a super important number. Why? You have 40 hours of actually regular working time, or like full-time working in Germany. That means 8 hours every single day. So if you're talking about 16 hours, that means like out of your masters, or like out of the weekdays you have, you just take 2 days out and you are like kind of just working in those 2 days. So that makes your 16 days. And I would say like 20 hours is also possible, but it's rather towards the disadvantageous side, because you're actually compromising on your studies more than, because I think like 2 days is really more than enough. You have another 5 days to like kind of do whatever you want, also for the university or for yourself. If you kind of push it to like 2.5 days, I think when you do something for half day, the other half day automatically kind of gets ruined. So I'm not a huge fan of that, and I've seen students who like work too much, their grades suffer, and then afterwards they have weaker job opportunities afterwards, because German companies put a lot of emphasis on what kind of grades you have, or what kind of extracurricular activities you have done, what kind of projects you've done, what kind of research papers you have written, especially when you're going towards the research side, or maybe what kind of internships and part-time jobs you have done if you're going towards like the general like practical side. So that is super important to understand. So let's say you have your numbers. 10 is the lowest, 12.5, and then afterwards 15. Now let's say if you work for 16 hours, you will be earning with 10 euros per hour, 640 euros for 16 hours and 800 euros for 20 hours. Then with 12.5 you will be earning 800 euros for 16 hours of work per week, 1000 euros if you're working 20 hours. Then afterwards, if you're earning 15 euros per hour, then you will be earning somewhere around 960 euros a month. And if you're working 20 hours per week, you will be earning somewhere around 1200 euros. A super important thing to understand, and this is the brutto, right? So like after this, your social contributions, your taxes and everything also gets cut. So that is also an important thing that you have to remember in Germany. This means that the salary in hand, of course, it like varies from one kind of state in Germany to the other one. Like in East Germany you have lesser taxes, and West Germany you have more taxes because of the Solidaritätszuschlag for the East Germany. It's kind of like rather underdeveloped if you compare it to like the German standards, and that's why the people in West Germany pay some kind of extra tax so that the people in the East Germany could be helped out. So if you look at all those numbers, for 12.5 euros per hour, if you're earning 1000 euros a month, that is 20 hours per week of work you're doing every single week, then you would be earning after tax somewhere around 800 euros. And if you're working 16 hours per week, then in a month you will be earning somewhere around 800 euros, and then the netto becomes somewhere around 640 euros. There's also an online tool that you can use. I will put it down in the description so that you can just take a look and like put the numbers inside, play with them around a bit, and see like what kind of final netto results you will have. Another super important thing to understand: single people have the tax class 1, married people can take the tax class 3 and 5 or 4 and 4. A bunch of different kind of combinations are there, so you can take a look. For me and Alina, so Alina was doing her full-time job at that time, and I was of course doing my part-time job. So Alina had the tax class 3, so 3 is the tax class where lesser taxes are cut, and 5 is the tax class where like crazy amounts of taxes are cut, like almost half of your salary goes away. During my part-time job, like of course I was working a lot more, but the money that I was getting in hand, that was like very less. We are married, so like things become easier that way, like you can contribute and just run your household better. For single people, of course, like taxes are a bit more than the tax class 3, but it's still not as bad as tax class 5. So just like go play around and you will have some nice idea like what kind of income you might be earning afterwards when you're maybe in Germany. So let's see, I told you like the final money in hand that you might be getting could be somewhere from 800 euros to 640 euros, or 640 euros to 800 euros, no? And the expenses I was talking about was somewhere around 500 to 700 euros, right? So if you think of it like that, like of course you can finance your studies completely by part-time job. But do I recommend this? No. The only reason for me not to heavily depend on just your part-time studies is that your studies in Germany is going to be difficult. I mean, it is really not a piece of cake that you just come here and like you clear your exams and everything and things run fine. And this is also the reason like sometimes many students, like I think many students, a bigger majority of the students do not complete their masters or bachelors in the Regelstudienzeit, or like it's the standard period of studies, so they do not complete their masters in 2 years. Like they rather take like 2.5, 3 years, sometimes up to 4 years, because the studies is difficult. And then if they have to also manage a part-time job, then those people tend to move towards the 4-year spectrum. If you're not doing any part-time job, those people tend to move towards the 2-year spectrum. For me it was different, like I was doing all sorts of crazy things. I was working for 2 semesters when I started my new studies, but I was still able to finish it because I don't know, I think like I had no other option. But I'm just saying this is a very big generalization. Maybe you're a really smart person, you're able to like do everything very quickly, no? And along with taking care of your part-time studies. Super important, just do not heavily rely on part-time job, because the stress of studies is going to be really high. And then afterwards, if you also have to think about where am I going to pay the next month's bill, then it just becomes a lot of stress. And like students are already feeling different because they're in a completely new country and like they're still getting used to different kind of things. And this is also why German government ensures that you're having 853 euros every single month already when you're applying for the visa. If you don't have the 853 euros per month, then of course you're not getting the visa, or like you can get some sponsorship letter from somebody who is living in Germany and so on. But still, like you have to show them that you are financially independent so that you don't have to take the money from the state. So even though technically, or if you run the numbers, it is feasible to completely self-finance your study just by part-time jobs. But yeah, like whatever you're doing, like be very careful if your part-time like job schedule is going to affect your studies or not. If it's not affecting, then of course you can work, take care of the labor laws and everything. And if it is affecting and you feel really pressured, really take a step back, rather focus on the studies, ask your parents for help, or like apply for some different kind of scholarships. Those are also available in Germany, but more of them are actually available when you're already a student. So post-admit scholarships are way more in number than pre-admit scholarships. So again, something super important for you to remember, right? So these were just some quick advices and tips what I would do in your situation. If you have any kind of other questions, feel free to write to me in the comment section, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.